From LSU on Sports Illustrated joining us this morning to talk some ball. Good morning, my friend. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, man. How's it going?
Doing well. Let's just get started going back to Saturday. I want your thoughts from what you saw Saturday night against Louisiana Tech. I told Lloyd, and I brought this up, we talked to Jacques yesterday, that 2-0 feels a lot like 1-1 this week because there are a lot of question marks that kind of rose back up to the top after LSU, maybe with not the most impressive win over Louisiana Tech on Saturday.
Yeah, man, I'm right there with you. I think there's a lot of question marks on this team, specifically up front still. The offensive line is still a little bit of a question mark to me just because the rushing attack has been so weak. I know you got a weapon in Caden Durham. We saw Harlem Berry break off a big-time 40-plus yard rushing attack. But for me, I still think there's some question marks. And when we had the opportunity to sit down with Garrett Nussmeier and company on Tuesday kind of evening, he was talking about there's still an opportunity for them to really hit that next gear. So for me, when we're talking about question marks perspective, it comes from the offense. It's been a defensive masterclass over the first 2 weeks. But for me, kind of pacing back to that week 2 win over Louisiana Tech, it feels like 1-1, right? They felt like a sluggish win where they just barely got over the finish line. But nonetheless, you're 2-0 going into Florida week with an opportunity to really play some complimentary football. And that's what Brian Kelly's been searching for since he got to Baton Rouge, right? You've had a good offense time and time again. But now you've got a good defense, and now you got to complement that with some good offense from Garrett Nussmeier and company. So moving forward to Florida week, man, it's all about putting it together and kind of making that puzzle look the part.
Offensively, it felt like they moved kind of backwards to the 2024 LSU offense. What do you expect the offensive attack for the Tigers to look like on Saturday against the Gators?
Yeah, I think you revert back to what you did at Clemson, right? You go and kind of get those quick plays. You get the ball to your playmakers in space, like Xavier Thomas, Barry Brown, Aaron Anderson, and allow those guys to eat. I think if you get the ball to your playmakers in space and allow them to turn it upfield and kind of up the tempo offensively, you're going to be in a good spot. For me, I don't think you'll see a game like you did in week 2 against Louisiana Tech again from Garrett Nussmeier. He was all out of sorts. There was a lack of urgency. He was missing throws that he never misses. And on Tuesday when we spoke with him, he was talking about that interception that he threw where he really underthrew it to Barry and Brown on the left side of the field. And he said, when you play quarterback that long, you're going to have a missed throw here and there, but that was inexcusable. And we all kind of sat back and laughed and agreed with him because it was an egregious missed throw. I mean, that was something that you don't see from an elite quarterback like Garrett Nussmeier. So moving into week 3, I think you see a balanced attack offensively. You try to get Caden Durham more involved, but you also see a Garrett Nussmeier that's dialed in and really ready to lead this team in their SEC opener to kind of hit their stride again, shake off week 2, and kind of start to get back on pace with that team that we saw in week 1 and that win over Clemson.
And I want to ask you a little bit just about Florida. Obviously, they dropped their week 2 game to USF in somewhat embarrassing fashion with the expectations they had this year. What do you expect the motivation level to be like for the Gators coming into Death Valley on Saturday night?
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about that yesterday on the radio, just about they have something to prove now. They really don't have any margin for error. And unfortunately, LSU's that next team up on the docket, right? So LSU's got to click on all cylinders against this Florida team where offensively they have weapons to really shine. I mean, Eugene Wilson is an absolute animal. Their rushing attack can be superior when they want to. But lucky for LSU, when you have the guys in the trenches that you have, you can try to slow that up as best you can. But nonetheless, what they can bring is a phenomenal offensive kind of attack. And then defensively, you bring back Caleb Banks, which is one that I hope a lot of LSU fans aren't sleeping on. This guy is disruptive in the trenches. And when LSU hasn't necessarily been shining in their rushing attack, insert Caleb Banks, who is a guy who can make it even more challenging. So when you look at what the Gators can present in week 3, it's a phenomenal offense when it's balanced, right? You have DJ Lagway, who's a 250-pound quarterback who's very hard to get on the ground. Whit Weeks talked about it. They're going to have to wrap up, utilize kind of that strength that they have and wreak havoc to get him to the ground because it's such a challenge. And then when you look on the other side of the ball, you get Caleb Banks back in the fold. And this is a guy who can really make things messy in the trenches. So we're going to try to see them play complementary football. I think LSU's talent is just too much. There's too much depth. When you look at that too deep depth chart, LSU has the edge, obviously, in this one. I mean, that's a casual take. But nonetheless, man, Florida's going to make it a dogfight. They always do, and now they're coming out with something to prove.
And to talk about Florida's rushing attack a little bit, you should shine a little light on it. That's something that LSU hasn't had to face really this season. Clemson got away from running the football so quickly week 1, and then obviously Louisiana Tech week 2. As good as this defense has looked for the Tigers up to this point, they haven't really had to face a true rushing attack. And that, to me, is something that Florida is going to bring. What are your expectations for LSU's defense against DJ Lagway, Jaden Ball, and this Florida rushing attack?
Yeah, I think Blake Baker is the best defensive coordinator in the country. I hope that doesn't sound like a homer take, right? But nonetheless, this is a guy who has the talent that he's been looking for. We saw last season, the scheme was there. He knew what he wanted to do, but he didn't have the personnel to do it. Fast forward to the 2025 season, and you got Jack Pyburn on the edge, Patrick Payton wreaking havoc, of course Bernard Gooden, the winner of fall camp that we all got to see. Now the entire Tiger Nation's getting the opportunity to see just that. So for me, I think they can slow down this rushing attack in a big way just because you have so much talent in the trenches. But nonetheless, Jaden Ball is an absolute animal. This is a guy who can really, really shine. His yards per carry really kind of jumps off the page when you look at it. So just containing him and keeping him in check is key. But you also can't allow him to be dynamic. He can catch the ball out the backfield and turn it upfield in the blink of an eye. And that's where Whit Weeks is going to have to be really dialed in here. Florida loves to move, kind of put guys in motion before the snap. So you can't fall for that eye candy that Blake Baker and Brian Kelly love to talk about so much. In order to keep them in check, don't fall for the eye candy. Obviously, utilize your weapons in the trenches like a Bernard Gooden, Dominic McKinley, Jack Pyburn, who I think everybody's going to keep it under wraps, but I really think Pyburn's going to want to come out here and just absolutely eat against his Florida team. So allow him to shine and allow Blake Baker to put him in position to be successful. I think this team has a good chance to come out with a win in week 3.
I love the Pyburn take because there was a little bit of it got a little messy there for a second with what Pyburn was. Means like I wasn't asking for that much money. I don't know what the deal was, but Florida obviously not happy with the fact that they lost him, which means good things for LSU. With that said, he's somebody that I think with the LSU additions that they made in the portal, and you mentioned DJ Lagway, and you've seen what happened last year with LSU against mobile quarterbacks. Has that been kind of, I guess, quelled a little bit after just one performance against Cade Klubnik?
Yeah, I think we know what happened last year with Jalen Milroe, Marcel Reed, etc. I mean, they gave LSU hell. Every single week. I mean, it was a challenge last season. And now it kind of comes back to what I was saying a little bit earlier about Blake Baker knew the scheme that he wanted, where he wanted to wreak havoc in the backfield, but he didn't have the personnel. Now he has that with Pyburn. And, of course, a healthy Harold Perkins. For me, man, I think everybody just expects him to be great just because what we've seen in the past. But coming off of a torn ACL, he's gotten over that mental hurdle. Physically, he looks the part. He gives you that kind of safety net, that blanket that you want at the second level of defense. So when you utilize Harold Perkins to the best of his abilities, Whit Weeks, Jack Pyburn, you're going to be in a good spot to slow down the run. We know that in the trenches you have Bernard Gooden to really kind of give you an edge. But when your second level of defense is coming up and wreaking havoc as well, it puts you in a really good spot. So we saw all that on full display against Clemson in week 1, right? They made Cade Klubnik stay in the pocket, kept him in check. They had 0 rushing attack. I don't know what it was, 2.1 yards per carry maybe. So to keep that in check was key. And now you're going to have to utilize that once again in week 2 to really slow down that rushing attack against a talented Florida team.
And I want to ask you about LSU's other coordinator. Obviously, there was a lot of high praise after week 1 for Joe Sloan. And then that kind of dissipated after week 2. What is the pressure like for Joe Sloan going into week 3 right now, as it seems that he has all the weapons and they just haven't been able to click yet offensively? What's the pressure on Sloan looking like going into week 3?
Yeah, I think there's certainly a level of pressure when it comes to Joe Sloan just to get everything right. I mean, have a balanced attack, but it also comes down to execution as well. I think it's easy to point the finger and point it at Joe Sloan and say, oh, man, you're not putting us in position to be successful, et cetera. But in times where you were in position to be successful, there was a lack of execution, whether it was missed throws from Garrett Nussmeier, missed reads in the backfield from Caden Durham, et cetera. So, you have to make your play calls correct, but you also have to have the execution. To me, it starts in the red zone. I think obviously when you look at them running it up the middle 3 times in a row, you scratch your head. When you have a 6'4" monster and Nick Anderson on the outside, a healthy Tre'Davious Green, etc. But getting into the red zone, you have to execute at the same time. So it's twofold. You have to execute, but at the same time, you have to put your players in position to be successful. So I'd like to point the finger at Joe Sloan, but at the same time, I have to point it at some of the players as well, because it's twofold. Both sides have to execute. It's both parties. And I think this week in practice, Brian Kelly really talked about it on Monday during his press conferences, working on red zone execution, getting consistency within the offense. That's been the utmost importance. It's been that focal point during practice this week. I'm hoping it all comes to fruition this Saturday night in Death Valley.
Do you think you see a world in which maybe Brian Kelly gets involved with the offense again? You saw him do that, obviously, again in the Florida game last year where they controlled time, clock, yards, everything, and just weren't able to score in the red zone, but it was a simplification of the process of what they were doing offensively. Now with no Tre'Davious Green in the red zone, do you think that maybe Brian Kelly inserts himself again as a, I don't want to say de facto play caller, but somebody that certainly has a voice in the room?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and one that I've gotten a couple of times this week, just because
Buddy Sanji beat
the
me
answer
to it.
in short would probably... Yeah, I've talked to Buddy about this like time and time again, man. And I've talked to a couple other different people too, and they just ask me about that. It's like, do you think Brian Kelly's going to have a hands-on approach when it comes to the play calling? And it's like, look, he has the headset on. He has the opportunity to kind of veto any call that he wants. I don't think he's going to do that. I think there's a trust that he has within Joe Sloan and Blake Baker as second-year coordinators. And sure, he has his spin on things as well. And pre-game, I'm sure, they script those first 15 to 20 plays of the game, right? With Joe Sloan, with Brian Kelly, with Garrett Nussmeier. They're all kind of schemed up pre-game. But going into halftime and having halftime adjustments, I think that's where Brian Kelly's going to give his 2 cents. I think that's where you're going to see a big-time change if things are going south. That's when Brian Kelly's going to put his spin on this playbook, be more vocal in the headset to Joe Sloan and the other play callers up there. Of course, Cortez Hankton, your co-assistant or your co-offensive coordinator. So to answer your question, Lloyd, yes, I think he will have a spin on things, but I don't necessarily think it's going to be a pure hands-on approach, almost every single down type deal. I think he'll have a spin on things, but it won't necessarily be avid every single time.
And then speaking of this LSU offense, obviously 2 of your key pieces go down last Saturday, and they're both listed as questionable yesterday. What are your expectations for Braylon Moore and Tre'Davious Green, and what are your expectations for LSU if both of those guys are not on the football field?
Yeah, again, I think it's a great question. When you look at Braylon Moore, this is a guy that if he's 75, 80%, you put him on that field because you're going to need him. This is a guy who is irreplaceable, a critical piece to your offensive success. We know that, though. That's your center on the offensive line. That's a casual take. We see what kind of happens when he's not out there. It's a struggle bus. So for me, if Braylon Moore is 75 to 80%, you put him on that field and you try to see what he can give you, especially knowing that you have Southeastern the week after. It gives you an opportunity to kind of reset. Not necessarily need to utilize all your playmakers. Nothing on Southeastern, but of course it's an inferior opponent when you look at LSU's schedule. So for me, if Braylon Moore 75, 80%, you throw him out there on that field and give him an opportunity to lift this team if need be. And then on the other side, it's Tre'Davious Green. And it's unfortunate because all expectations are that he won't play this weekend against Florida. But you have Bauer Sharp, who I know he hasn't necessarily looked like what we saw during fall camp, because for me, he was my offseason winner. I think if you speak to a lot of the guys in the media, Mike Scarborough, Bryce Kuhn, etc., a lot of us were really high on what he could provide this offense, that being Bauer Sharp. So to not see him necessarily pan out to this point, it's a small sample size at 2 games, right? But to not see him pan out necessarily has been kind of a thorn in this offensive side. Now you've Tre'Davious Green potentially sidelined. My expectation would be that he doesn't play this weekend. But if you can fall back on Bauer Sharp, I mean, this is a dynamic tight end, one that can put his hand in the dirt and block. He can really become a weapon in the offense as well as a pass catcher. Obviously not a Mason Taylor guy, or Mason Taylor caliber guy, but he can pan out and catch those little slip screens if need be to turn it upfield. So, look, you put Braylon Moore on there if you can, and then when you look at kind of Bauer Sharp filling in for Tre'Davious Green, it gives you a pretty good second option, considering he led Oklahoma in yards and kind of receptions last year.
Another player that I think has kind of made a little bit of headway after their performance against Tech is Harlem Berry. how many, I don't know if you put it over under on snaps, or how important do you think he'll be to this offensive game plan? As it feels like, obviously it feels like Caden Durham, running back 1, and you continue to try to find that running back 2, whether it be a little bit of a gambit with Xavier Thomas. You continue to see Caleb Jackson get some burn, but it's not really working out the way that you expect it to. Then Harlem Berry comes in, electrifies the crowd. He seems to be the flavor of the week.
Yeah, I love Harlem. I'm a New Orleans native, so to see somebody from the city really showcase what he's all about, it is big time for me. So I love Harlem. Obviously, it's hard not to like a 5-star #1 running back in the country coming out of high school. Just a sensational player, and LSU fans got a taste of what he's going to do in the future last week against Louisiana Tech, where he's shaking defenders at the line of scrimmage, getting into the defensive backfield, spinning off, and turning it upfield for a 40-yard gain. I mean, that's what he's all about. I mean, I'm never going to put expectations on somebody and call him Reggie Bush, but coming out of high school, those were the comps. You look at what Rivals and On3 and what their scouting department said, it was that he could be a Reggie Bush caliber type of guy. We saw kind of tidbits of that last week. So when you look at the rushing attack and divvying up those snaps, we know Caden Durham's your lead back. But from there, it's a really big question mark. It's huge. It's kind of a by committee approach. You're giving Xavier Thomas some run at the backfield, but you're also giving it to Caleb Jackson, a little bit of Juwan Johnson in week 1, but not as much in week 2. And then you give Harlem Berry some love last week. So for me, it's a big time question mark. Lloyd, to come back to your question, kind of a snap count on a guy like Harlem, I think in SEC play, if you can get 5 to 7 snaps out of him every single week, I think that's big for a true freshman in the SEC to make an impact. I think Caden Durham was physically the part as a true freshman. It's extremely rare. I don't think we should underestimate what he did for this offense as a true freshman in 2024, that being Caden Durham. But for Harlem Berry, there's still some work that needs to be done in pass pro, as well as getting his body physically right for the SEC. He's put on 15 to 20 pounds, but I'd expect him to put on at least 7 to 12 more pounds as well moving into next year. So getting physically right, continuing to up that side of things from a strength perspective, I think that's when you're going to start to see him make a bigger impact. But if you can get 5 to 7 snaps out of him each week in SEC play, that's a major win.
I want to ask you about some of the players that we've named and spoken about this morning are guys that are wearing the purple and gold for their first time via the transfer portal. How rare is it that a team like LSU goes out, brings in, the 17 or 18 transfers that they did, and the 15 guys they're putting out on the field all make instant impacts and have been huge additions to LSU, whether it's Patrick Payton, Bernard Gooden, Mansour Delane, Cooley, Halsey, Bowersharp, Braylon Moore, Josh Hop, go down the list. They went out, they brought these guys in, and they've come in, and they've been instant impact guys for the Tigers.
Yeah, I think it's unprecedented, Noah. I think we saw Wilson put a story together a couple months ago saying that no team that has added more than 9 transfers has won a national title. And it's a small sample size, of course. The transfer portal era is very new. But nonetheless, to see LSU bring in 18 guys and have double-digit newcomers be so impactful is extremely rare. And obviously it starts defensively, right? You look at these guys like Patrick Payton, like you said, Jack Pyburn, Bernard Gooden, and then you look in the defensive backfield, Mansour Delane, who to me is looking like a first or second round draft pick so far. I mean, he's been phenomenal. Mansour Delane, again, was your highest graded defensive back in college football in week 2. So he's been sensational. Then you get to the third level of defense. Again, even deeper into an A.J. Halsey, to Marcus Cooley. I mean, it's a new look defense, and by design for Blake Baker. He wanted this. I've said it twice already. I'll say it again. We knew what he wanted to do from a schematic standpoint, but didn't have the personnel to execute it. Now he's got the personnel, and you're seeing what it's capable of. So defensively, to have so many newcomers be so impactful is rare. And then on the other side of the ball, probably my favorite player this year so far through 2 weeks. Again, small sample size, but Barry Brown, to get him from Kentucky, it's a true dynamic playmaker, can do so many different things. Offensively, is a weapon on special teams. Sat down with Xavier Thomas this week where he was talking about Barry Brown and really hyping him up and talking about how he is truly the best kick returner that he's ever seen in his life. Word for word was what he was saying about Barry Brown. So nonetheless, man, you have so many impactful pieces that are truly shining so far through 2 weeks. It's unprecedented, but now you got to continue to carry that momentum into week 3 and dominate during the SEC play as well with so many fresh faces.
You mentioned some of the transfers, one of which was A.J. Halsey, and we remember, you don't have to go back that far, I guess, Clemson, what would you say, I guess, we don't call it a snitch, but they did their due diligence on
reporting
on.
We'll call it a snitch.
At this point, they draw snitch on A.J. Halsey and how he had to sit out the first half. If you're LSU, do you do the same thing for Brendan Bett as Florida's defensive tackle that, just an absolute lug fest on USF? Would that be something that you have to, I guess you could inquire about, whether it be a first half suspension or not, because it's fighting or unsportsmanlike conduct? Either would is disgusting.
It's a fair question. It's a fair question. I mean, they're two different things, though, right? Like, unsportsmanlike conduct doesn't carry into the next game, so I don't think he'd be able to get in trouble for that. But if it was for fighting, then we're looking at the exact same situation that happened with A.J. Halsey, where, he got kicked out of the game for what was initially called unsportsmanlike conduct, but then they went back and reviewed it and said that it was fighting, which carries over to the next game, which gives you a first half suspension. So, yeah, man, if it happened to you, you might as well try to kind of utilize it to your advantage in the future if you're LSU. So why not try to inquire about that and try to utilize any advantage you can?
He called it a, quote, a terrible mistake.
Yeah, right.
Last one I want to ask you, what do you expect Death Valley to look like Saturday night?
Oh, yeah, man. No, it's going to be rocking. I think you're going to see the true Death Valley. I loved how Brian Kelly hit it this week, where he was talking about you have the resume. Everybody knows what Death Valley is all about. But then you got to show out and live up to the expectations. He was talking about how everybody had a week 1 and week 2 to kind of get their mind right and kind of have that practice in week 2 for Louisiana Tech for the home opener. But now it's SEC. It's a completely different mindset. It's a completely different ball game. And you got to utilize that home field advantage as best you can. So, yeah, I think Death Valley's going to be rocking on Saturday night. I don't think you can ask for much more. Florida as your SEC home opener, it's perfect. I mean, it's great for LSU from a scheduling standpoint. I can't wait to see what this fan base looks like, but they'll definitely need it. I think LSU's definitely going to need it, man. It's going to be a fun one. It's always a challenging game, a dogfight against the Florida Gators. So utilize any advantage that you can. And I think having that home field Tiger Nation really going crazy is going to give them an opportunity to be successful.
Well, Zach, we appreciate your time, all your insight this morning. We'll talk to you again soon.
Of course, fellas. I appreciate it. You have a good one.
Got it. You as well.